Okay, what can we help you gentlemen with?
We're, I guess, hoping for further light and information on some things. The biggest thing that we've got is, one, Paul Greenwood. I don't know if you guys want my card or not, but.
Sure.
So I'm the facilities engineer for IMP. This is our first year in operation. Through the course of construction, there was kind of a lot of things that went around as far as how the permitting process was done. And I'd like to, I guess, if we can, we'd like to make some changes on how that assessment was done for our first year's tax assessment.
When was the assessment done?
It was done for 2022, so they received their first assessment in June of 2022 for the 2022 year value.
Okay. And did you receive that assessment?
We did.
And did you protest it on the time that says on the notice?
We did not until we started learning how the permitting process was put together for us, so we didn't understand what the total value was on that assessment that was sent to us, if that makes sense.
Do you have a copy of the assessment?
I do. That's what?
That's different.
What's this?
These are all different. These two are the same.
What are we after here?
Oh, I didn't, what are these for?
These are all Carolyn gave me this year, which is for over, looks like the land. Partial.
Oh, okay.
Is this a partial year?
It is partial year,
Okay,
yep.
that's
And then
what I
there's a
wondered.
separate land as well.
This is the land,
Is
and
this
this is
the
partial.
one that Roger has?
The top one is.
And the land is a separate one? Okay. Let us get copies of that.
Sure. You want this land one as well? He's making copies of both, but did you want?
This is a smaller parcel. This is just.
There's another?
This is just a strip of land in front probably.
So there's three parcels, or two
Correct.
parcels?
There's three parts.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Okay.
That's the strip.
Where is this building?
It's on
Iona Road,
Right after the canal.
just past the canal.
Down by like the salvage yards, kind of.
Oh, that end of Iona Road, okay. Is that just west of where the tire place is?
Mhm.
Okay. Is that in that industrial park?
No, we're just east of the industrial park there,
If you
other
come
side of
off
the
Holmes,
canal.
As soon as you cross the canal, after you turn off Holmes, as soon
Yep.
as you cross the canal, it's just right on the inside the canal.
Oh, okay.
You should come by, we'll give you a tour. It's a pretty fun
Okay.
spot.
So you're out there by the transfer station?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, no, not quite to the transfer station yet, but
Right in there?
in that direction.
Okay. Hold it appropriately.
Thank you.
Okay, so shows the land value of 113,
Of one of the parcels, yeah.
one of the parcels.
Of which we're not contesting that one.
And the improvement value of 38,000.
38 million.
Oh,
Yeah, there's no zero on that page for that line.
So the improvement value is the one that we have in question. So the improvement cost, the contract that we have with our contractor is 40 million. So when we looked at the 38 million, I was thinking, hey, that seems about right, but usually it's prorated when the project isn't finished yet. So at the time of the appraisal, so I called and asked about it. I don't know who's, you're Brian. Brian, nice to meet you. We've talked on the phone a few times. I asked him about it. He walked me through the appraisal process, and I said, you know, that he had already done the prorating associated with it. And I was like, well, what did you have for your assessment value? And he had 67 million. So that's where the beginning of my question came up. So the reason why we didn't contest it then is because we saw the 37 million, not thinking that it was an issue and that it just needed to be prorated. So that's when I brought up the question about prorating, and then it's like, no, your actual assessment value is 67 million. When I went to Idaho Falls to start pulling together what they had for their permits, the only values that I could put together was 65 million. Again, the real value of the full construction or the improvement project was 40 million. The process that the city used to go through and assign permits, there was 33 permits pulled on the project. In kind of, if I had, you know, I wasn't here, I've only been with IMP for a couple of months. So it's all before my time, but if, you know, coming from my construction background, there should have been 3 permits and 30 addenda to said permits. And so with all the values that they put down on each of those, it just cascaded into the monster that we have now. So I'm not really pointing fingers at it. There is an agreement with the city and IMP that we're not paying any permit fees, and so I think from that regards, it was just kind of pulled hands off. There was no permit fees assessed to this while we're
How
doing
did
the
you get that to work through the
We
city?
just worked with the mayor. You know, they were really nice. They have a program where if you hire so many people with your program, they start to alleviate. It's a program to help incentivize businesses to come into town. We've got over 300 employees, and I think it's been a pretty good asset for the community.
We just haven't been successful on projects we've tried to get them to forgive the fees on. So I was just curious.
Yeah, sure. So that's where the genesis of this. So being that we're one of the first ones across the finish line in this regard, I think there's been some, I don't want to say irregularities, but maybe some things that haven't been communicated real well with how the permits were documented and the values assessed on those versus going into the assessments put together with the county. I don't know if that can be outlined a little maybe differently.
The first thing is, I've never heard a case where we relied on permit values because they're usually quite a ways below.
County permits are generally low, city permits are usually based on the bid.
The city permits are based on the winning bid of each bid for each permit that they issue.
Yeah.
So just to clarify, the value that I based the value off of was 63,077,343. Not the 67.
And that was based on the permit bids.
And the value as of
Was or wasn't?
Was.
21st was 68,348, which is right here as of January 1st of 22.
How do you account for that discrepancy between what you're saying?
So it's pretty simple. The first permit that's on there is that $40 million. And I can show you all the documentation for construction costs. All of these other things are, and that $40 million also includes the machinery improvements that we do inside. That's not just the building costs associated with it. Building cost alone is only $21 million.
So that 40 million included all these?
That $40 million included all of those other line items. So hence my comment on, really, these should have been addenda as opposed to being actual permits. And there's more permits associated with this construction project than what are outlined here.
I was
So,
gonna say, because if I do the math, that's 23,000 over the 40.
right. So if I go through and add up them on Idaho Falls side, which I'm sure there's been things that were pulled since they went through and did this last year. There's additional permits, if you will, that were pulled from that. So I guess, the hindsight being what it is, I think the preferred way
Very top
to
permit right there was for the $40 million, which was only for the shell of the building. And then the rest of the permits follow.
But the shell is only, so again, I like how they go through and outline the points on this. It does really good job for, say, a commercial type project. It doesn't do a good job for like an industrial project. So there's a lot of breakdowns that go through an industrial project. It's slightly more complicated than what is inquired by the system. And so I think that's where we started on the improvement. So usually on a construction for an industrial project, these things are added up as an addenda to the said project. And then there's a plus or minus that goes along with those if they are within the original assessment or if they are without the original assessment.
So the 38 million value is a partial year.
It is 60% is what I valued as the partial.
Of which I think for percentage-wise, we would agree with that. It's just the assessment.
60%
Of
complete
63.
January 1st.
Correct.
2022.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that 63 million valuation came from,
The total of all the permits that were issued on the project. And those are all the permits that John has right there, Roger.
Correct. Well, I understand all that. The difficult thing we have is you didn't file an appeal on the statutory deadline.
I understand.
Not our deadline. That's set by the state.
I understand. There is a statute within there that it can be brought up retroactive if there was an anomaly within the communication between the city and the county.
I'd like to see that statute because it's only if there's an error on behalf of the county,
So the error that
not the communication.
well, the error that we're proposing is in how the assessment was put together and the values that were used outside of what we had communicated with the city as well. So I think that it's more of a communication side and where we're getting our information instead of going to the source of it and how that math was put together at the beginning. Now, again, when we looked at it for the 38 million, if that was the total assessment, we got no problem, but there's nothing in the communication that was given to us that said the assessment really was 67 million. If the assessment had said, we're doing 67 million and it was a reduction off of that, it would have been much more clear at that time, but it wasn't because we were planning on it being part of the 40 million. And having an assessment of 38 million as opposed to 40, well, that makes sense, for wherever it kind of comes out in the pennies on that side.
I'm very, very familiar with that because I built a twin home several years ago. And they sent, it was partway through a year. I got my tax notice and I thought, oh, this is great. And then when I got the one next year, it was prorated. And I should know better, but I didn't.
Right.
And there was no mechanism for me to get that changed because I missed the appeal time. I mean, that's the issue, communication,
But if the county doesn't identify, and that's the statute is they have to identify what the assessment value is. The assessment value is not in this documentation.
as of January 1, 2022, that was the assessed value. But the property wasn't completed at that time.
No, that's not the assessed value. That's the prorated value, not the assessed value. And there's not a distinction between the prorated or assessed.
As of the lien date of January 1, 2022, that was the
That's
assessed
to
value.
what it was existing on the physical property as of January 1st.
That's immensely unclear.
And that's by state statute.
Well, by state statute, though, it has to say what the assessment is, not what the depreciation value is. It's two different numbers entirely.
yeah,
And it says in the statute, the two different numbers. So when you're gonna go through and use two different numbers for developing that, you have to identify both of those numbers.
One isn't an appreciated value, though. It is a current value based on its partial value because it wasn't completed as of January 1, 2022. It wasn't an
Again,
appreciated value. It was just as of January 1, 2022.
This is what exists on the project as far as completion according to the total.
when did you complete it?
last November.
So you completed in November of 2022?
Correct.
See, because the other side of that argument is you were charged at the 38 million and then the value increased all during the year, even when it was completed, you still paid the full year on the 38, because that's the way the statute says you set the value on January 1st. So even though it was increasing, there was no, on a mass appraisal, you'd never be able to keep track of that on all the different parcels in the county. That's why they have specific deadlines.
I understand the specific deadlines, but in the putting together that information, not all information was present.
And that's because of the way the city reported the.
Okay, so it wasn't disclosed to us on that information, how it was pulled together, right?
Yeah.
So you can't have it both ways. Yes, we're gonna go through and do the addenda on it, and then, yeah, we're gonna assess you at 63 million.
We didn't
We
didn't pull the permits. What do you mean it was not disclosed to you how the permits were? We didn't have anything to do with the permitting process.
No, it wasn't disclosed how you put together your assessment. That you went through and used the permit values on
Right.
that. That's not something that's stipulated by county
I guess
statute
that's
or
a
state
question I've
statute.
got is why is that the only thing we use to determine the value? Don't you typically do?
Usually for industrial projects, usually with the county assessment, so I've done a lot of industrial projects, and usually when something like this is done, I've been in many county assessors before we even started the project to go through and identify how those costs were gonna go through and line up.
Let me get an
So-
answer to my question. Why didn't we use more than one method to determine?
Right now, the final value has not been set. There was not an occupancy value done on the project because it is going to be reported as an industrial property. So they'll be reporting the building costs and the personal property that are invested into the property, which will set the value for 2023, as soon as they report that.
Historically, those permit costs are accurate and we're there, you know what I mean, as far as value. And moving forward, as Brian said, we'll go through that process of going through the industrial. Where the discrepancy came, if you feel like the permits were overbid or they should have been addendums and the total cost of the 63 million is higher. But again, historically, as we've gone through, we're going by those costs. They've been accurate.
Because historically,
They're not accurate by any means.
Historically, as the city issues the permits, each one of those permits is issued for the portion of the job they're taking out, and that was, according to the city, the bid value for that portion of the job.
They're not accurate, and that's the whole
Then
point
the
of what
$40
I'm trying to
million
make
permit
is.
was taken out as a shell only. So that's telling me that that's only for the shell. There's nothing else included in that. There's no personal property
It's
included
never
in
that clean cut on an industrial project. That's what I'm saying is your documentation, how you're pulling those permits, you can't just look at it that way and say, this is how the whole structure is the support for all the mechanical systems. So the superstructure for it that's built inside of it is way more than what the rest of the building is. So yeah, they pulled it out so they could get started on what the shell of it was, but the mechanical layout was well in regards with that too. But they wanted that as a separate permit, which is just weird.
That very first permit that Headwaters pulled out, though, was only for the shell, and that's all they pulled it for.
It wasn't,
And that was the
but
bid price that Headwaters had on the shell.
for the entire
As
project.
far as right now, as far as just the shell, that's what Headwaters pulled the permit.
No, the permit, I can show you what Headwaters had for their bid on just the shell, which was 21 million. So the 40 million is for everything that goes into it.
Historically, that's not the way the city would issue the permits at all.
Well, this is an interesting difference of looking at it. But the problem we have is this is the discussion that should have been happened when you got the assessment
Back in
notice
June.
and appealed
Right,
in June.
right. And if we
Because
had
that's
that
when
up-
we had the authority. Let me finish here. Because they opened that window and closed it for us on the authority. And part of the reason is because everybody you see on this list, this assessment is made so we can collect their property taxes, including the city of Idaho Falls. We have no mechanism, if we're to go and change this, where you don't hit the appeal, to go back and collect that back from Idaho Falls. And, when you send out an assessment notice, they send out, how many thousands of those do you send
About
out?
60,000.
But how many of those assessments are valued at over $500,000?
Probably quite a few, but on any of those assessment notices, it doesn't go through and outline the process they went through. The responsibility as a taxpayer to look at that and say, this is a fair value, or I disagree with this value. And then the instructions on the assessment notice are, you have until
The 27th, I think, fourth Monday of June.
first Monday of June to file an appeal. And so that gives us the statutory authority. Laws do make a difference, and we have to follow it.
I understand, but I think there's exceptions in this case that are outside or within the conditions stipulated where it can be contested.
But they're not atypical, what you've described of what they do for all other.
No, I think what's atypical is that only one point of assessment was brought into it and no communication was done with the owner on it in developing that number. Especially for a first number where the where the tax bill is over $500,000 a year. I can't imagine there's too many companies that are paying that much in taxes here.
What they usually do on industrial or on commercial, they use the three levels. You don't have any of those other than the construction cost where it's a partial. That's what we
No,
have to
that's
go.
not true.
And
And
we
you
will
didn't know that
utilize-
was true back then either.
Did you have any income?
No, but we had a lot of expenses.
Okay, but you weren't in operation with the income and the expenses on the typical. You didn't have a balance sheet for the business operating there because you didn't have a CO, did you?
No,
Okay,
but you
And
still have expenses associated
but that's
with
what
it.
they use for the income approach, and they have to do it the same for all.
But you have an overhead, you have investors that are putting money into it.
You have an overhead of building the building, which increases the value, which, the flip side is what I pointed out. You went through the year increasing that value that they didn't pick up. You paid it for the full year.
Okay,
But.
then what's the next
we can-
step? Because I don't think that this is done and there's $250,000 left on the table. I don't think that's something we can just walk away from right now.
Okay, the next step on this is, I think they've missed the time to appeal.
Yeah, because I'm not seeing where a mistake was made. The mistake you're looking for, the assessor's office, would be if somehow they failed to mail it to you, or there was some clerical issue. The fact that they may have got the number wrong, that's not a mistake that you can bring to us at this point. That is the value that should have been contested during the window.
If we had picked up that 40 million permit twice, and we put an evaluation of 80 million because we made an error of calculating the values incorrectly, when we're utilizing those permit values, again, historically, they've been accurate, and we don't have any additional, or if we had gone through this process in June and you appealed and we failed to make that correction based on our discovery of whatever issues they may have been through the permits. But ultimately, with your property and every property in the county, we're required to place the value as accurately as we can based on the information that we have. And at that time of valuation, the best information we had led us to believe that the value was at 63 million. We sent the notice. we didn't have any-
63 million was never identified.
Okay, and that part of the discussion, I think, is gonna be fruitless to keep going back on. Because what is before us is whether we have the authority whether we do have the authority where you missed the deadline. And that's gonna be my
And I don't
suggestion
think
for
we do.
reality, that you missed the deadline. The window of appeal is closed. And if we go,
I would make that motion.
okay,
Just have one question.
Okay.
If this is the permit values and they came from the city to us, and there's an error in these, which we didn't know because they've always been accurate, then is there recourse for them to go back to the city? I mean, I
that's
don't,
up to them.
yeah.
Based on the information we've got, that would be my
I
motion.
know how our hands are tied by the state
Yes.
law.
So do we have a second?
So you have a second?
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
So our decision is based on you missing the time for appeal. Now, any remedy of that, can they go to a BOE this late where they've missed it? I mean, they can make an application to the State Board of Tax
So
Appeals.
Board of Equalization and Board of Tax Appeals their deadline has come and gone. I don't know.
So the only other recourse is on an administrative challenge to our decision to the district court, and you'll have to visit with your attorney on what your remedies are there. So we'll get you copies of, this meeting minutes and the reason for our denial if you need them.
Please.
So, okay?
It's gonna be important, and I'm sure you will, we need to revisit this for next year's assessment, before another
And we've already
assessment comes on.
communicated with,
So that if it's incorrect, it doesn't happen again.
So if I can, maybe
So
a
I-
step going into the future, when there's a
If you're
tax
debating-
benefit to the county and to the city,
Uh-huh.
that's in as large a sums as they are, some phone calls are, I think, warranted, and most other counties operate along those lines.
Okay, and we can't speak to that, that's the assessor's process.
Upon completion of the project, I was talking personally to Cade
Well,
at the plant.
We're gonna let you guys work on that, because discussing next year's value now would be outside of your chance to appeal if you get the new value and you disagree with it. So I would look at that valuation, talk to them, communicate back to them on what that value is. If you disagree, you have a right when you get this notice to appeal it to us during the window of BOEs. That opens up the authority for us.
that window is always the fourth Monday of June. This year it happened to be on the 27th, but fourth Monday of June, just keep that in mind. That's the deadline to appeal.
Okay?
Thank you.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
your time.